Hello. It's the 19th of June, 2015, and this is episode 11 of the Unseen Podcast. And this is the unedited, unscripted spin-off of the Wow Signal. To learn more about the Unseen Podcast, go to unseenpodcast.com. And tonight I pretty much put out an open panel call, and we have with us, let's see, start from left to right. Ciro Villa. Say hello, Ciro.
Hey, Paul. How are you?
James Garrison.
Greetings, Paul.
Greetings. Mike Bohler.
Hello, everyone.
I see that Nick Nielsen has just joined us.
Yes, hello.
Patrick Festa.
Hello again, Paul.
Hold on just a second, guys. And new to the Unseen Podcast, somewhere on the road in Tennessee is TJ Mulich.
Hello, Paul.
TJ Mulich. Who is TJ Mulich?
Let's see. I was a Marine back in the late 80s. Was a grunt and flew in the backseat of OB-10s. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went after my aerospace engineering degree, and after getting my degree, I got recruited into the space industry. Started out with direct broadcast satellite. Was with AT&T for about a year, and then went to Landsat 4 and 5, and then I got a job offer with Johns Hopkins and worked on Near, Messenger, New Horizons, and Stereo. And I got tired of looking at a monitor all day long and wanted to have a different view, so I got into the trucking industry.
Well, good for you. I know TJ from the Near program where we worked together for about a year back in the 90s. Near was kind of fun. It was one of those better, faster, cheaper things where everybody had to do everything. So, now, while we've been sitting in the green room for the last 20 minutes, we've been talking about tonight's topics. Lacerent Planer, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, one of our community members, suggests we talk about the flyby anomaly. I have to admit, I have not had time to do the homework on that, so we might save that for a later date. But we have Mike Bohler with us, who is an expert on conspiracy theories. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about space conspiracies. In fact, there's some new ones coming up. Mike, can you tell us about some of the recent space conspiracy theories you've been hearing?
Yeah, these are just popping up on my radar, so I don't have a whole lot of details, but apparently the series with the Dawn spacecraft, those shiny spots on it may be alien related, because there's also a photo floating around showing a pyramid nearby. And this is all built by aliens. Like I said, I think it's just it's one of these emerging. I'm just starting to see that. And then the Philae space probe on the comet is also a subject of a conspiracy. Again, I think it's relatively new. This is coming out of Richard Hoagland. If you're not familiar with him, he's a very
only too familiar.
Yeah. For our listeners, this guy is he's been promoting the idea that let's see, I think he promotes the idea that there have been life on Mars, the moon,
Face on Mars.
Yeah, the Face on Mars stuff. Then he's got this physics that he's made up to account for whatever he wants to make it work for. It has to do with the modification of light speed, the speed of light. that somehow that the speed of light as it leaves the as you get away from the solar system, it changes. He doesn't explain why or how, and his math doesn't work anyhow, so it's hard for anybody to even, I don't know, challenge him other than buy a calculator, dude, type of thing. But he's been promoting this idea that apparently on all these on all the planets at 19.5 degrees latitude, latitude, that there's these magical nodal points, and that's where and apparently those two spots are on this 19.5 according to him. So that's why he thinks this is all alien. This is an alien technology. So that's pretty much all I know about him. And
yeah, I remember the face on Mars when it was that was in the 70s when it was first photographed. Very low resolution, very noisy image, and you'd look at it and you'd say, "Yeah, that could be a face. It could be a face." But then we finally, many years later, finally got better images, and okay, it's not. But did Richard Hoagland step forward and say, "Okay, folks, I was wrong. It's not a face"? No, he didn't.
No, he blamed he said NASA's hiding the evidence, and
well, of course, NASA's hiding the evidence.
I got a question for Mike.
Sure.
It's funny how these guys come along and they do all this stuff, and they're obviously the ones that are doing the photoshopping. They're obviously the ones that are promoting these conspiracies. In my book, they're like the worst kind of troll. What bothers me is that some of these people are doing it just for the 15-minute or 15-month in some cases fame, and they know that it's all a bunch of lies. And yet there are other people in this country, especially, that are actually believing this stuff. So in your opinion, who is this guy? Is he one of those trolls that just, photoshops and does all the stuff knowing it's a lie? Or is he actually believing the stuff that he's trying to promote? What is your opinion on that?
With Hoagland's case, he actually, I think he really believes this. I mean, he believes what he's, everything he says, because reading some of the material on him, when the Jet Propulsion Lab released the photos, he actually believed that, hey, here's a good reason to send more probes to Mars, maybe even get a human lander on. And this is it. There's something on that we need to see. And apparently he did get like Carl Sagan involved with it. But when NASA and everybody who was trying, that would be involved, began to shoot down the idea, well, it's going to cost too much. There's nothing in the budget to do something like this, or it's not even worth going for a budget. Hoagland started believing that there was a conspiracy within NASA to hide this information, that this is all part of the Freemasons, because a lot of his stuff and a lot of his early stuff has been based on Freemason links. Apparently, some of the astronauts were Freemasons. They launched on Freemason Day or stuff like that. And of course, then he makes the connection with the Operation Paperclip and the Nazis that were like Werner von Braun, who had been brought over to work on the program. So it's this. So he kind of went into the deep end after being shot down with his ideas or attempting to.
He was upset.
He was upset. Yeah. So it became he's kind of made it his mission to expose NASA and show that the physics is wrong, everything's wrong, and we're being lied to about these civilizations on these different planets in the solar system. And
does he make a living doing this?
And he makes a living at it. He's wrote a number of books. He does, I'm, when I looked at a lot of other, like David Icke, who thinks that they're the reptilians, that the elites in the world are actually shape-shifting reptilians. There's Alex Jones. These guys make roughly about $2 million a year in what they do.
See, that's why I say anybody who's able to do that. I don't consider myself, a genius, but I'm pretty, I think I'm a little bit smarter than the average bear. But when I see these guys doing this and actually making money on it, it occurs to me that these are charlatans who know exactly what they're doing.
Oh, exactly.
And they're just doing it because they know they can make money.
Yeah.
But you can't avoid the fact that the psychology behind it is much more complicated than that, because many people who want to believe things think themselves into the point where they really do start believing it. Even people who manufacture their own evidence can convince themselves that they're doing it in a higher cause and that they have a reason to do so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Cognitive dissonance is a very powerful force.
As is cognitive bias.
Yes.
Yeah, see, like with me, I think the coolest conspiracy that ends up turning out to be true is the UFOs. I mean, it would be way cool if these are actually space aliens visiting us. But, you got to show me some real evidence, not a fuzzy photo of whatever you're taking a picture of.
Yeah, I saw something interesting along the lines of that just yesterday. A guy who says he's a former FBI agent was analyzing Bill Clinton's response to Jimmy Kimmel's questions about UFOs. And he analyzed it I think they talked about it for about 3 minutes on the air. And he spent 40 minutes analyzing everything Clinton says and every gesture. People are really looking for that. I mean, there's UFOs, which is, I've actually investigated UFOs before. People see things in the sky. Usually it turns out to be something like a drone aircraft or the planet Venus. Not always. Sometimes you can't really tell them. You really can't identify it. But wrapped around that is this mythos, which has a lot of levels of conspiracy. If you've ever watched the 90s series X-Files, they mined that entire mythos for several seasons. Somebody on their writing staff knew everything about it. That none of that I'm convinced is at all plausible. Maybe the government does know something we don't know, but it's probably not much, and it's probably not what they think it is. But it's, this notion that we have dead aliens or underground bases and all that. Some people have actually made a living at that sort of thing. I don't know if you ever heard of the radio show Coast to Coast AM.
Yeah,
I bet you have, Mike.
That's Hoagland's home turf, basically.
And that radio show draws a huge amount of advertising revenue.
Yep.
And it's pretty much conspiracy theory.
I think
and it influences millions of people every single day.
And this is because from the philosophical basis, I think that it's the psychology of the human mind. I think that what's going on is people try to escape the monotony of the day-to-day life. I think that's one of the fundamental reasons why many humans look for things that are fringe, if you want. It's one of the ways for many of us to escape the obvious and the rational. And, there's something into our psyche that wants to look for something beyond, something unknown. That's kind of, I don't know, it's a spirit of exploration that goes goes to the extreme, if you want.
Yeah, I look at it like science fiction.
I was going to say, I look at it a little bit differently in that we've gotten rid of the old gods, the Greek, the Norse, the ones that could explain the oddities that go on in daily life. So I think people are kind of looking for something to replace the old pantheon.
alien, reptile men, honest politicians, just things that aren't actually there in order to try to...
No, reptile men, yes. Honest politicians, no.
The other way around.
But they're trying to find something in order to, like I said, explain everything that goes on in the world around them. They don't want to think that the world is completely governed by chance. They want to think that there is something there that is controlling it.
Both,
go ahead.
Both that and what Ciro said, it can be true at the same time. People are seeking something exotic and interesting, and people are seeking a replacement for old gods. Joseph Campbell, the mythology scholar, said that a ritual is an opportunity to participate in a myth. And seeing a UFO or going to a UFO convention has become a kind of ritual. You participate in the modern myth of aliens visiting Earth by either saying you saw a UFO or believing that you saw a UFO or participating in a UFO Congress. And you get to get your, like Ciro said, you get something exotic and interesting, and you also have a replacement for the old gods that are no longer effective.
Right.
Well, I think that can go for any conspiracy theory.
For many of us, it's a way to escape the mundane. I keep on going to the idea that for many of us, it's a way to escape the mundane. We got our lives, and many of us have a certain amount of monotony and predictability, right, in the physics of the world that surrounds us. So I don't know. I guess it's a natural instinct, even for those of us that are more rational and somewhat discounting of things that are fringe in nature. Even those of us that they still believe, they still look at something exotic and like for example, Paul is a science man. He works in a scientific field, but he's fascinated. I am the same way. I feel the same way. I look at the rational things, but there's an intrinsic and unborn fascination for something that might be unknown, right? I think that's the spirit of this entire podcast, is to understand and to explore what could be out there. And I think it's a fundamental characteristic of the human mind, if you want.
Yeah. Now, Ciro, I think there's a lot of truth to what you say. I think it's very easy to look at everyday life and feel bored and feel that it's uninspiring and not really worth living for. And so you look beyond, you look to your religious beliefs, or you look into the mythos of your culture for something.
Right.
You look for something bigger than yourself. But, I want to point out, some new research just came out that I wasn't aware of. I think it came out from Carnegie Mellon and some other places, that everybody has a biased blind spot. And by everybody, regardless of level of education or how science-minded you are. And it doesn't seem to have anything to do with IQ. We all have biases, and we all have the inability to tell that we have biases. And I don't know if you ever read the book, Mistakes Were Made, But Not By Me. That's one of my top recommended books.
I'll have to look for it. Well, the thing is with me, it's like, it's the same reason why I'm an atheist. I'm the kind of person that can't stand a liar. And these conspiracy theorists and many of these fundamentalist religions, they're all liars, especially the ones that create these conspiracy theories just to make the money. The snake oil salesman. We all hate the snake oil. I can't stand liars. I can't stand snake oil salesmen. And this is what gets me. And there's a problem, especially in this country, as you know, with people who are scientifically illiterate. And the science illiteracy is mainly caused by the snake oil salesmen who push away the actual reality for the mythos, as Ciro called it. And it bothers me. It literally bothers me. They should be putting some of this money into actual science programming on TV, for example, things like that.
Right. But now there's a difference between people that honestly are searching for something, because I mean, this is also in a way, if you want, this is the important point is that the convergence between science and pseudoscience, and this is a very controversial convergence point as it is, because there's people that think there's certain things that are going to the realm of pseudoscience are science and vice versa. And I think that the importance of that convergence point lies in the fact that there's some people that honestly want to explore what is could be kind of a acceptable, what could be, what it's worth exploring. There's some people that honestly believe that certain things might be real. And then there's the other ones, which I think was what Patrick is referring to, is the ones that are blatantly exploiting, and they're doing it for pure lucrative purposes. Those are scam artists, if you want. So I think that there's a difference there of purpose.
Another aspect of the pseudoscience is that you have people who aren't exploiting it, people who aren't exploring it, but they have a belief in space healing, acupressure, homeopathy, naturopathy, that is actually in the end going to be harmful, because they're going to neglect, actual medical treatment. They're going to neglect, taking care of themselves.
This is the people that were taken in by the snake oil salesman.
Yeah, or you have like people who grew up using around here what we call a hedge doctor, which is just a naturopath. It's not so much that they're taken in; it's their culture. It's what they grew up with. There are conspiracy theories that have proven to be harmful. You've got the bunker builders, the guys that they think somebody's coming to invade them, and they're building these massive complexes, sinking tens of millions of dollars into them, driving themselves bankrupt for something that is highly unlikely actually going to occur. So a lot of the things that fall under pseudoscience, and there's a lot of, as Mike and Paul, they're skeptics with me also on this, but a lot of the skeptics, it's not so much we're trying to get out there and debunk myths. We're actually trying to protect people from being harmed by a lot of the pseudoscience that's out there. I don't have a problem people looking for Bigfoot. I've done it. I don't have a problem looking for UFOs or looking at even possible functional alternative medicine. But it's when you keep going down the same dead-end path and running into the same wall over and over again, you'd figure you would back up and try a different route.
To me, the deception is, and I think that I had a short debate via chat with Paul a while ago regarding this particular this particular idea of the what I consider a threshold between science and pseudoscience. I think that the important thing is, in my opinion, the honesty part comes when you know that what you're talking about is pseudoscience, and you don't claim that what you are talking about is a scientific facts. And I think that if you do not deceive the public, and you keep a certain amount of delineation between what is science information and what is not, then you can talk about whatever you want. To me, the problem comes when you are trying to kind of inject what is not really science information in what is the science discourse. That's where the deception comes into play, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, let me give you an example. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there was a lot of research into extrasensory perception. And the first UK PhD in parapsychology was earned by somebody named Susan Blackmore. And Dr. Blackmore, for years and years, tried to come up with a replicatable experiment that would show that there was some kind of extrasensory perception. And she just, no matter what she did, she couldn't come up with it. And every time she tightened the protocols, the signal went away. And so, she was in fact doing science. in my opinion. She was really working hard to find an effect that she couldn't find. But she was very troubled by the fact that there really was no definition for it other than it's what's left over after we've explained everything else in our experiment. So she eventually became an ESP skeptic and decided that in spite of the fact that she had once been a strong believer, and went on to other things, but she's now considered one of the leading skeptics. I recently went onto the forum of a leading paranormal podcast and suggested they have her on to talk about the problems with ESP and also things like consciousness and memes. And this started a firestorm of people claiming that she was a shill for the man.
Right. In other words, the real person that was really doing the actual science. You can believe something actually exists and then do the science to test for it and find out for yourself that it's not real or debunk it. And that's being a scientist. Scientists say, well, I guess I was wrong. And that's what she did. But then you have those people out there that automatically discredit this person because they did the real science. And that's a shame.
I think you'll probably find very much. I think you'll find it's very much in the minority when people actually change their mind on the basis of scientific research and scientific evidence. There's much more often when you look at the science being done by people who want to believe in marginal phenomenon, it usually comes across pretty quickly that the science is not the central idea for them. What they're looking for is a way to prove something that they already believe, and they'll spend most of their life trying to keep doing that, no matter how many times you get a negative result.
Yeah, this is true. Actually, that thing, there was an article I wish I could find regarding this particular bias that many do not recognize in the scientific community.
Confirmation bias.
Right. Exactly. But it's
religion.
Very profound. It's very profound, apparently, in the scientific community and not recognized. Where a lot of the scientific research that takes place, it's really more to like you said, to confirm, confirmation, to confirm something that a priori, versus trying to explore different avenues, and so there's a fundamental bias there that apparently is much more pervasive than we even know, according to some study.
Well, that's what religion is, right? That's what religion does. They do it backwards. They have a bias. They think something is real, and they try to prove what they're doing is real, no matter what. Every time they turn around, they'll manufacture evidence just to prove that they're right, and that's religion.
Well, I mean, yeah, but this is more at the scientific hypothesis level that I was referring to. I wasn't necessarily talking about religion or other realm outside of science. I'm talking about actual hypothesis of science, where somebody says, I think that the reason why this is occurring is because of X. So they, in their research, almost subconsciously in some cases, or in several cases, they are going to go ahead and be biased towards that reason X that would explain a certain cause and effect mechanism, instead of giving the same weight to other explanation. They are going to go and fundamentally be biased on that explanation X to begin with.
But it's usually not very subtle. If you look at if you look at good science and bad science, it's usually pretty darn obvious who's trying to prove an idea they already have and who's actually trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, in many cases, probably it's really obvious. It's just the way that it's a flaw. I mean, it's really a flaw in the scientific process, in a sense.
But if the scientific process is followed in any kind of a rigorous way, it doesn't have to be a flaw. It's a flaw in the person saying that they're doing science when they're not really doing science. They're just trying to prove the idea that they have that they need to believe in so badly that they'll do anything in order to try to make it look plausible.
It's a flaw in the presentation of a certain study or studies, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah,
well, I mean, is there a border, though, between, the serious science and the pseudoscience where things get fuzzy?
Well, I think you should make a distinction between pseudoscience, which is something that presents itself as being science but isn't science, and actual scientific investigation of phenomena that usually aren't investigated by science. So you can certainly have a scientific study of extrasensory perception or a scientific study of UFOs, but most of the stuff that's going on in these areas is pseudoscience. It's not really science. It's just made to look like science, because if you make something look like science, that gives it greater credibility, even if it's garbage.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously
that's
certain
true.
pillars. There are certain pillars of the scientific research that that have to be followed for something to be described as being a science. Many times, those pillars are not reflected. But there's a lot of people that do not understand that. There's a lot of people that do not know that there's scientific research method that it needs to be followed for something to be called science. That's where the mix-up happens, I think.
Right. It's in the method, and that's why we have the method. I'm sorry, I don't remember the woman's name who was doing this research on the psychic phenomenon. In other words, everybody has these experiences that sure the heck seems kind of like I saw that somewhere, kind of thing, So she followed a scientific method to try and figure out if it was real.
Right.
And she by doing proper science, she concluded that it wasn't. She concluded it was probabilities and math going on, that it just seemed it was just a little weird thing that's going on in the brain, whatever. And she concluded for herself that this was not a real phenomenon, and that's a good thing.
Right. Now, one of the things about conspiracy theories, or areas where you cannot prove things scientifically, so you cannot falsify something, and this is one of the strengths of people that go to fringe theories, or one of the strengths of people that bring forward the fringe theories is the fact that those are not even falsifiable in the first place. So if you cannot falsify something scientifically, you can kind of make whatever claim, right? You can say, I can make whatever fringe claim. You cannot prove that wrong. You cannot falsify that. So things get flipped around very easily. When you can
there are those people that have ideas that are just wrong, but they don't, in other words, they may not be liars, but they're contributing to the conspiracy stuff. But the ones I'm concerned about are the people that are deliberately doing. For example, about a year or so ago, I discovered a little article about the Loch Ness monster, and it was elephants' trunks. There was this elephants up there in that area where the Loch Ness, that actually walk under the water in a semi-shallow lake, and with their trunks up. And when I saw this photograph, or several photographs of these elephants walking through the water with their trunks up, I'm like, oh my God, it's the Loch Ness monster. It was right away. You can see it immediately in that fuzzy photograph that was an elephant's trunk.
Of course, there's nothing shallow about Loch Ness. It's 700 feet
deep? 750 feet deep.
Yeah, it's very deep.
Well, I don't know. There was, I don't know if they swim or what they do, but they do hold their trunks up over the water. And if you look at the fuzzy photograph, you'll see that it's actually an elephant's trunk.
Elephants do swim with holding their trunks up underwater. There was a great PBS nature special a few years ago with some really dramatic photographs of that.
And now, do Scottish elephants do that, though? That's what I'd like to know.
Well, this bears the question then: how do the elephants get up to Loch Ness?
They just use the picture.
There's a specific herd of some kind of specific elephant that's up there or something. I don't remember the PBS, but there was a specific set of elephants that were in two places on this planet. One of them was near that water.
So there's elephants in Loch Ness.
I kind of doubt that. It's bloody cold in that water. It's really cold. I don't think elephants are like
whatever body of water it was. This photo from decades ago.
Are you talking about the surgeon's photo?
I don't know what the name of it is.
Because there was one that came back and said it was a model submarine that they'd put a toy sea monster on the top of. I think it was the Twisty Monster.
Yeah, there was another one about that. But when you see the elephant's trunk coming out of the water, you can literally overlay the old several decade old Loch Ness photo and overlay it on top of this new PBS thing and see that, like, if you size it right, you can literally come up with, wrinkle per wrinkle an elephant's trunk.
This is somebody, I think I found something, but I haven't found the actual source here. This is one of the sub-sources. It talks about a certain Dr. Neal Clark, which is apparently was a Scotland's top dinosaur expert. And he came to the conclusion that the famous Loch Ness monster was really a circus elephant. So, according to this article that I'm reading, he noted that the famous photo of Ness, of the Loch Ness monster, nicknamed Nessie, looked very much like an elephant swimming, with its head and body mostly submerged, and his trunk sticking up out of the water. So,
anyway, the point of what I was trying to say was, this was a deliberate attempt to lie. Person who took that photo knows what it is. Could have been an elephant, the circus elephant, whatever. And this person, proliferated this lie just to have some fun or to make some money.
Right.
So it really wasn't an elephant Loch Ness. It was an elephant in its natural habitat, and they're trying to pass it off as an elephant. Whereas Loch Ness.
This was in 2006, apparently. I haven't found it on CBS News. There's an article 2006 on CBS News about that. Dr. Clark's claim about the circus elephant. So I don't know what to make out of it.
I was going to say, if I could go back to Ciro's comment a few minutes ago about falsifiability on conspiracies. Even if you can falsify them, that's just more, and I think Mike might agree with me on this one, but it's just more evidence for the conspiracy.
Right. Exactly.
Or they take the conspiracy up one level. They say, so that's what they want you to think.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, a lot of people do not have familiarity or do not believe in the scientific. You got different. We don't want to box people, all the people that are into conspiracy theory in the same box. Obviously there's different degrees, there's different facets, there's different beliefs, but there's a lot of people that are anti-science. I mean, there's obviously, nobody can deny there's a philosophy, there's a school of thought, if you want, out there, of people that are just skeptical of science a priori to begin with.
Yes.
They think that scientists are crooked,
yeah.
the scientists are all liars. I mean, let's face it, there are people that believe that way.
Yeah, especially when science does not confirm or otherwise contribute to what they already believe. Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, that's just it. That's just, in other words, the root of this. I'm going to say is many religions, but the root of it is the conspiracy / religion factor, where they indoctrinate you, and then the people don't get educated. And of course, there are people out there, lots of people, and that's the problem in this country. There's a scientific illiteracy in this country specifically because they didn't learn the right way to do things. They didn't learn. I'm not telling everybody to become a scientist. I'm not even a scientist. I'm a science enthusiast. But there's a right way to understand how science works, where you can dismiss and laugh at this conspiracy stuff. That's the problem. The problem is people are not taught that. Instead, they're following these ancient aliens on History Channel 2. This is ridiculous. It's like, take that show off the air and put something real on. Maybe people will get an education for a change.
Well, something real has to draw the same advertising revenue, which which is a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I as much as I dislike the star system when it comes to science communication, I think sometimes you need a star like Neil deGrasse Tyson to draw the audience.
It makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. I think there's lots of really great science communicators out there who we've never heard of, and we'll have one of them on the show in a few weeks, Brian Coberline. But it's not easy to come up with something that's scientifically accurate that people want to watch. but it does happen. I mean, one of my favorite shows is MythBusters. Now, it's not, it's not really it's a science show, but you have people thinking rationally, solving problems, doing experiments, and changing their minds about things sometimes when they realize it's not going to work.
Right,
and,
you got a couple of guys who are Hollywood special effects experts.
Yeah,
doing some real science.
Yeah, and, sometimes it's just can you flip a motorcycle and blow up a water tower or something like that? But the fact is they have to think through the problem, they have to do the experiment, and it's fun to watch because they usually end up blowing something up at the end. But or they shoot something, or there's some spectacular disaster at the end of it. But the fun part helps sell the fact that these are people who are taking us through their thought process as they construct the experiment. And that was I think they do really great work.
Yeah, yes, they do. That's a really good show.
Science is hard. The speculating is easy. Speculating is easy, but it's glorifying. It's speculating things, imagining, right? Using fantasy and imagination. It's glamorous. Ancient Alien is glamorous, but doing real science, doing hard science is not. It's not glamorous, right?
It's hard work.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it's not appealing to a lot of people. The lab and the work in the trenches. On the computer day in and day out, that's what astronomers do, right? They crunch numbers. That's all they do nowadays. It's not glamorous, but talking about some sort of a civilization that might live underneath the layer of planet Mars, yeah, that's fun,
Yeah, but that's what science fiction is for.
Well, I know, but that's
by the way.
Exactly.
Speaking of the Mythbusters, Adam Savage. I was at the Reason Rally back in 2012. Adam Savage gave the best speech on stage at that rally, and he mentioned he says part of his speech was I play something about scientists. He says I play one on TV, and I'm in awe of the people who do it for real.
Yeah, I think Adam's a good guy. He's one of the good people.
But don't ever ask him to squeeze the Shermer, though.
Michael Shermer is another great skeptic communicator. And, of course, one of the great successes of those we sometimes refer to as the Four Horsemen, Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, and Daniel Dennett, they were great communicators. They were funny, and they knew how to make an audience laugh. They knew how to draw an audience in. You can watch, Sam Harris videos on YouTube, and it's a real crack-up. When he pokes fun at people in a sharp way, people respond.
Oh, yeah.
That's effective.
Well, yeah, and Hitchens was the master of wit and eloquence.
Yeah, he was. He was a great speaker.
I also like the poet. I love Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's terrific and he's a star and all, but he's certainly no poet of Carl Sagan. There is one guy in Britain, Brian Cox.
Brian Cox.
Yes, he is, in my opinion, close to the poet that Carl Sagan was. A bit different. He's a young guy, he's a real. He's actually working on the Atlas, I think, at CERN. So he's one of the guys that puts on some of those space shows that gives that same sort of poetry, the way he talks, the way he speaks, and tries to explain to you how things actually are.
Yeah, and he's also got a really good podcast he does occasionally called The Infinite Monkey Cage.
Yeah.
Check that out if you haven't. It's funny.
I heard about that.
It's funny and it's interesting.
It's him and a comedian in front of a live audience.
Yeah, and the panel is a mix of comedians and scientists.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they've had Eric Idle on. They've had some other people you've heard of that are funny.
Yeah.
And they have scientists too.
It's a real good. I second that one.
Yeah, and it's brave. It's brave of them because they have to kind of wing it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Not all scripted.
There's a lot of good upcoming science communicators. Also, another one that I respect a lot, and is very active also on social media, is Dr. Phil Plait, which many of you might know. He's used to be called the bad astronomer.
Sure, yeah.
But he's making a lot of. He's also doing series on YouTube now, basic astronomy series. But he's an excellent communicator as well.
I think this is his second mention on your show, Paul.
Yes, it was. I think in episode 9 we talked about his "Don't be a dick" speech.
Yep.
So just knock us into PG-13 territory.
That sounds like what the Will Wheaton would say, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but Will Wheaton might say that himself. Yes.
Well, I mean, if like 5 minutes later you completely lost any PG rating, so don't worry about that one.
Yeah,
That's the risk of having bull riders on your show, truck drivers.
I wouldn't worry about that one. There's been far worse on some.
Bull riders who have a problem with homeopaths, yeah.
But Dr. Brian Comberline is another person, obviously, like you already mentioned. He's going to be on the show, and another individual that I really respect a lot. He's also an astrophysicist, a PhD. Is Dr. Eaton Segal. I don't know if.
You pointed me to him earlier. Yeah.
He does a lot of good articles, and very active on social media as well.
Right. And there's others. Many of them are women.
Absolutely, yes.
And they're not stars necessarily, but they're very good at representing their field. Like Amy Mainzer, for example. There's a lot going on there, and I hopefully some of these appealing, eloquent, well-spoken people will not only be able to represent science before the public, but be encouraged to do so by their peers and the people that pay their salaries.
Right.
Because it hasn't always been that way.
But it's very difficult to squash. Going back to the theme, I guess, to the original theme, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to squash the myth and to convince people that are unconvincible, because there are people that are not going to be convinced.
No. In fact, the better your argument, the more you are a shill for the man.
Exactly.
And I've inquired where I can get one of these shill gigs that pay well, but apparently I'm not a candidate.
And people love, there's certain agencies, NASA, right? that people love to hate. I don't know what
that old devil NASA. Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's iconic. The whole thing about hating NASA is so iconic, and it's funny to me. Not to many other people, perhaps, but to me, it's really funny. But I don't know. I just cannot comprehend how can people extract and make an entire legend out of this agency.
Yeah, well, anybody who's been around NASA like me knows the people.
Yeah,
and these are not the tight-lipped, tightly controlled types you get in the national security community. These are.
Right.
These are a bunch of hippie scientists, right? They have their own ideas, their own opinions, and they're not the least bit bashful about saying them. So, while NASA does maintain some control over public outreach, they're not going to be able to silence somebody who has something important to say.
Right.
And they encourage people to publish their results.
Oh, yeah. I just don't understand the whole. First of all, I don't know. Maybe Mike might have more knowledge about the history of the conspiracy theories surrounding NASA and all the legends surrounding NASA. I'm not knowledgeable about their history, but it's fascinating on how people focus. That there's a lot of focus. I mean, obviously it's because of the nature of what NASA do, right? I mean, that's kind of trivial, but it's still fascinating to see the kind of stories and the kind of things that people can create, surrounding NASA as an agency.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, everything is a government cover-up. Yeah.
Have any of you heard about the bizarre conspiracy story about the Denver airport?
Yeah, I've heard of Denver. Denver.
I've heard of airports.
I've been there, and I think the conspiracy theory might fit the facts, but
I never heard of this theory.
Okay, let's
That's,
explain to the audience what the history of the Denver airport conspiracy is.
That's supposed to be a New World Order mega facility with miles of tunnels underneath. And the artwork and everything's supposed to hint at it. That's just what I remember off the top of my head.
Where is the origin of this story?
It comes out of the same group of government control conspiracy theories, and people are always looking for, the Illuminati, the Bilderbergers, the 33rd degree Masons, who they run the world from behind the scenes, and they pull the strings, but for some reason they're pretty ineffective about it, and they have to hint at it with the sculpture of the deer with red eyes at the Denver airport. They can't just come out and say, "Hey, we won the world," but they can put a big sculpture at a big airport and presumably have a lot of tunnels that are more than just moving around luggage from one concourse to the next.
Yeah. Well, you know what happens is these people that take the tiniest piece of truth, just like any legend has this tiny speck of truth somewhere. Yes, the government military has secrets. Yes, this is true. We have to. I hope so. I hope everything is in public.
Yeah, there's no end to that program.
Okay, so you take this little bit, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, they're covering up that. Why won't they cover up this? For example, here's one. I never knew this. I never knew that Grand Central Station, New York, underneath our tunnels, there was this big dynamo. I forget what it was for, but there was during the war, it was some military for electricity or whatever. There was some military purpose of it, and there was a secret entrance. But that's been declassified and put on public television. I didn't know this until recently, but it's stuff like this. Yes, you're going to have secrets during wars and during military operations and things like that. Area 51, for example, is not a secret place. What goes on there is likely secret because they're building new types of aircraft and things like this. But Area 51 is, I think there's like maybe 100 or less areas in the desert, and they hired a pilot to find them the most levelest or the best place that they can set up a military base where they're going to build these. So this pilot went up and he circled Area 50, Area 51, and I think there was a couple others, and they chose Area 51, which is a non-name, a no-known name place on the desert in Arizona. Is it Arizona? Or was it New Mexico?
Nevada.
New Mexico, I'm sorry. In other words, there's these areas that are unlivable that they just numbered from 0 to or from 1 to 100 or something.
Yeah, the dry lake bed. I think some of the guys out there call it Groom Lake. It's been called Pleasure. It's got a ton of names that not one of them's official.
Dreamland, I think.
Dreamland.
The
alien port.
It's interesting though, because I think that this is in a way it's like we want to go ahead and realize the delusion of fantasy. I mean, in a way, we could write incredible science fiction books if we could take all these conspiracy theories and put them into a science fiction book. It would be probably the greatest science fiction book in human history.
That was the X-Files.
It's a website called InfoWars.
Yeah.
I made that comment so many times when I'm interviewed for shows and stuff like that, is that these guys, I mean, if they would have put these stories, I mean,
right,
into a book form, they can make a lot more money, as science fiction, as some type of fiction. I mean, Tom Clancy. I mean, and all his books.
These people aren't as good writers as Tom Clancy. I mean, they're lousy writers. That's why they're hacks doing what they're doing and making money off UFOs and parapsychology.
Probably.
L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah, well,
part of what makes these sexy ideas is that people can fool themselves into believing that they're true. If you remember some years ago, I can't remember if it was the late 70s, early 80s, when they marketed that series of books on alien abduction that they brought them out under a nonfiction label because, the publisher wanted people to have the back of their mind, well, this actually might really be true, and that gives people, the people who are really get into this stuff, then they can spend their entire lives trying to track it down and interview the people and waste a lot of their time.
Right. Now, I think that the one thing that we need to go ahead and because we got an audience, and I respect people believe whatever they are, believe it or not. It's not the matter of respecting or not respecting what people believe in. I think it's in my opinion, for me, it's just a matter of context. I mean, if things are put in the proper context, I think that everything can be put on the table. We can talk about alien abduction, and I think this is the point that I was making earlier. I think we can talk about alien abduction. We can talk about near-death experience. We can talk about UFOs, viewing sightings. But the main thing is to contextualize all of these subjects and make sure that we do not misrepresent their nature to the audience.
But the whole purpose of the conspiracy industry is to take them out of context and recontextualize them in another way. There's a name for this, and it's indoctrination. You can think of indoctrination as
thank you very much. That's exactly what
it's counter education. And if people spend their entire lives, or 10 or 20 years of their lives, building up this fake base of knowledge, you'll have a very difficult time reaching them because they already have a structure of knowledge, and every new bit of information they get is fixed is inserted into an existing framework. And when you have a scientific framework, you have a very different framework, and the new facts that you come across, you're going to insert them in your framework in a different place in a different way.
Nick for president.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take write-in vote.
Sorry, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's that's exactly what I'm saying. It's a counter education. It's literally anti-science. It's literally and some of these people that are doing it on purpose are the ones that I'm mad at. Not so much the people that are sucked into this stupidity. I feel sorry for those people, and I wish if we could just get at the root of this problem. The people.
Well, some of the true believers are the ones who can be the most bullheaded about it. I personally have a friend who forced me to go to a UFO convention with him in McMinnville. And I just felt I went to it just because he asked me to go. And I felt really nauseated when this person was giving a lecture and saying how all these great figures from human history, like the Buddha and Christ and Muhammad, were all really space aliens and all this kind of stuff. And the audience was just drinking it up. They thought it was great. And they have a huge convention every year in McMinnville. And all these UFO people get together and tell their abduction and conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it makes me nauseous too.
When I do my show, I try not to gear toward the hardcore, the trolls, that type of thing, because I'll never convince those people. They bought into their fantasy, and they're not going to let go of it. So when I do my show, I try to at least pick apart the claim. I'm just trying to think off the hand. Just trying to think what would be a good one. Because I'm thinking in my Pearl Harbor show, there was John Toland. He wrote some incredible books, really excellent history books. He wrote this one, Infamy, and it is a conspiracy book on the Pearl Harbor attack. And he talks about Seaman Z and the Lurline. The SS Lurline was a ship that made a transit between Los Angeles to San Diego to Honolulu and back. And right before the Japanese attack, they were making claims about, not Seaman Z. I forget the guy's name, but he was claiming that he was listening to the Japanese talking as they went across the Pacific Ocean. And so when I started picking that apart, it's like, well, first of all, radio direction finding, I pointed out, well, wait a minute. If he's saying the north, northwest of Hawaii. Okay, that would be where the fleet was. But also Japan is almost dead in a straight line. I was just trying, I kind of worked out where the ship might have been in transit. So not only where it would have been, I mean, everything lined up where it would have been the Japanese fleet, Tokyo, which was running a number of transmitters to communicate to the ships in the Pacific. And then it also went over, the signal would have been even further, and it would have picked up the fleet that was heading toward Malaysia to invade Singapore. So there's, so I pointed out there's no guarantee. I mean, when you look at a flat map, it may look like the only thing that would be there would be the Japanese fleet. But if you do it the proper way and use a Great Circle map, because the Earth is a globe, not a flat surface, then all this stuff lines up. And I present it that way.
Hey, you're disrespecting my beliefs. The Earth is flat.
Well, or isn't it supposed to be
some sensitivity?
There is no sensitivity in reality.
Reality is just an illusion. We're part of the
I used to have a
Matrix.
friend who used to say, I was a teenager, he was like, wow, reality, what a concept. That was his favorite saying.
I'd like to point out that I've had a little bit of experience in the alien abduction area. I thought that's a really kind of an interesting area. I'll preface that my opinion is that it's almost pure pseudoscience, but the part of the problem you get into, you talk about context, Ciro. When we talk about someone who's thinks they've experienced an alien abduction, and there are many people who sincerely believe that they have.
Absolutely.
When you talk to a researcher, you say, well, what we have here is someone who remembers being taken on board an alien spaceship.
Right.
We don't have someone who's been taken on board an alien spaceship. We don't have any evidence of that. We have a memory.
Right.
And they hate it when you point that out.
Yeah.
You say, what we're working with here is the witness's memories, not with any actual event that we know of. We've never been, in spite of many efforts, we've never been able to correlate that with a physical event. Yeah. And, so, and to me, that's the context that is vitally important in that field. And we have all these poor folks who, for various reasons, think that they've been physically abused by some otherworldly beings, and they need help that these abduction researchers are not giving them.
Right.
The abduction researchers take them into a room, hypnotize them, and plant false memories in them. That, this actually, and they start they get this loop where they reinforce the memories, and they get more and more believing this whole narrative that I'm being taken many times in my life since I was a child, and I've been impregnated, and I have alien babies, and there are people that really believe that.
It's precisely parallel to the witch hysteria in early modern Europe. If you read the Malleus Maleficarum and the other books that were used by inquisitors, the story just gained as it developed, and people added detail, and then people read the books, and then they would, of course, read the books, then they would go to interview the suspected witches, and they would say, well, did Satan come to you in the night? Was he incredibly cold? And of course, the whole line of suggestive questioning, and then the individuals being questioned, they would throw in their own details. So over a few decades, it became this incredibly elaborate so-called science. I put that in scare quotes, science of demonology, and that's what the contemporary idea of UFO sightings and abductions. It's precisely parallel. It's gained over time as different individuals with different motivations add detail and from all kinds of different sources. And the internet has been a megaphone for this, because it allows people to collaborate internationally instantaneously, and they can pull their details from any number of imaginable sources, including pulling information from legitimate science and throwing it in there as sort of like to show, we're aware of this stuff is out there too.
It's evolution of mythology. You go from the incubi and succubi to the witches to the aliens. And probably a lot of it is honestly either a slight misfiring of the neurons or sleep paralysis.
Well, I think that it's a lot of different things, but you end up with these folks who really, really believe it. And sometimes it's a false memory.
Right.
And sometimes we don't know how they came to think that happened to them. Other times they went to a so-called therapist who regressed them hypnotically, which has almost no basis in science, whatever. And then they started to develop this false narrative that, and it's the same thing that happened with with a lot of sexual abuse stories.
And the satanic panic.
Yeah, the satanic panic, the satanic ritual abuse. The hypnotherapists were right in the middle of that too.
The madness of crowds.
It's funny that James mentioned the sleep paralysis because, there is something that in our brains, like the reason why I like science fiction and fantasy, and we like to find these different shows on TV to entertain us. The entertainment factor is because when you discover the answer to why something is, it takes all the fun out of it. I happen to have a story. I was 2, maybe 3 years old, and believe it or not, I do actually remember this. I had a waking dream. I was 2 years old. It was fall time, I guess, because I was waking up, and there was this leaf on my pillow. And I picked this thing up. It was physically in my hand. I tried to wake somebody up and show it to them. By the time I did that, it disappeared. And at 2 or 3 years old, I realized I must have been dreaming this, but I really couldn't explain it. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I explained it. And all of a sudden, those type of dreams disappeared. I was like, oh, damn, I wish I could have one of those dreams. In other words, when the explanation came up, and I didn't panic. It took me 10 or 15 years to figure it out, but I didn't panic. I just knew that there was some kind of explanation for it, and lo and behold, I figured it out.
See, I'm a little different. When I find out how something works, to me, that makes it a lot more fun. I've got the kind of personality, I don't like not knowing, not understanding something. If I can figure out how... I used to take my dad, once I got big enough and started getting my hands on tools, I took my dad's car apart to find out how it worked. I like to know how things work, what makes things go. So to me, that's more fun to know.
Did he yell at you until you put it back together now?
Well, given that it was a 65 Mustang, and I wasn't supposed to even touch the car, I did my best. It didn't run right for about 10 years, but I did my best.
Chalk it up to a learning experience.
Yeah. Trust me, I spend more money than that educating my kids for the hard way.
I don't even know how much money he spent putting that thing back together again, right? Apparently you can't leave parts off.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it is.
If there's something left over, you wait a minute. It's like when you assemble a piece of IKEA furniture and there's a couple of screws left. You go, what?
Not a big deal.
Where should these have gone?
Yeah. But as you keep doing it, eventually you can build something from all the spare parts.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that one.
There are actually websites devoted to hacking IKEA to show you how to put together things that aren't anywhere in the instruction book from the various parts you have.
Oh, yeah?
Another conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Well, does it have more creative curse words than I come up with? I think it's probably it's something like 3 F-bombs per panel, I think is my rule.
Oh, at least somebody cusses more than I do.
Only in assembling things. Now, I agree with you. Disassembling things is a lot of fun. Unless you've just assembled it and you can't figure out why it didn't come together.
Yeah.
Well, I've been known to have parts left over from those cheap particle board entertainment units and bookshelves and things, and put them on something else.
Of course, they always throw in extra parts too.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Just to troll me. I know they do that.
Except for when they don't include enough parts and you have to go and buy extra screws or whatever in order to get it together because they didn't do the count right.
Mike, that's a conspiracy you could look into.
Yeah, I think there's something.
Actually, I can add that to my big gardener snake conspiracy. On the irreverent skeptics, we refer to the big gardener snake. We totally made this thing up, and we're trying to promote it. So see how much mileage we can get out of it.
Flying spaghetti monster style.
Yeah.
Send me the details, and I'll see. I'm in Oklahoma. It would not be that hard to promote it. Just for laughs, I tried starting a cult of the golden marmoset. Just for laughs, I had 30 members inside of a year and a half.
Not bad.
Well, you're not doing as well as like the
That's
Church of the
wrong,
Subgenius, but
Yeah, the problem was that I kept having to explain what a marmoset was.
well,
Did it grant wishes? Did it show the way to a buried treasure or a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? Your gold marmoset has to do something if you want people to believe in it.
yeah,
Well,
that
there's an
has-
interesting.
It was
there's an
just a cute picture in an encyclopedia.
There's an interesting thought experiment that I think that it's fascinating to me to think about. You all remember the Orson Welles hoax, right? Which the alien invasion house.
War of the Worlds.
Sure, War of the Worlds.
Right? Everybody remembers that. So my thought experiment would be if we were to repeat, someone were to repeat, some credible person with the same level of reputation as Orson Welles were to repeat this with today's technology, right, on the internet, and spread that as fact. Would there be more people, the same amount of people, or less people proportionally that would believe that?
I think they,
Well, see, that's.
I think they call that Fox News.
I was going to say The Onion, but that was even better.
I'm not going there.
Didn't Fox News pick up an Onion article and run it as the truth?
I think so.
yeah, The Onion has sometimes been taken seriously without enough justification.
Some
And then
foreign
there was-
governments,
Well,
some foreign governments have believed some of the Onion's articles taken as face value. I think the Iranian government.
Yeah, the
then-
guy from FIFA had a Onion article claiming that that the United States wanted a second World Cup, whatever it was.
Well, see, like as Sarah was saying, the War of the Worlds broadcast. The thing about that is it's like having a Woodstock 2. It doesn't really work. The thing about it was in the era of cool stories on the radio. Radio was a relatively new technology. I've actually got I listen to audiobooks. Let me see if I can show it to you. You'll see that little Tombstone radio sitting there. It's actually a speaker amp with a DVD player on it that I play my audiobooks on. And I actually have War of the Worlds, by the way. And the idea was it was new technology, and people turned on the radio, and that radio was probably one of the radios that actually listened to this broadcast, and they turned it on before the beginning, so that they didn't hear the part that said this is the storytelling time or whatever, and this broadcast started. And this happened in my state. I'm in New Jersey, and this happened in the area where I used to live. But I wasn't going yet. The thing is that the whole thing sounded to them it was real. If you listen to it now, you'd laugh. But at the time, because it's new technology and people weren't used to listening to stuff over the radio, and this is like, wow, this sounds interesting, and they believed that this was real. And it was a sci-fi story.
I don't think that the effect was quite as large as the stories make it out to be either.
Is that right?
I think it was a lot more. It was confined, like he said, to New Jersey and a couple of boroughs in New York or something. It wasn't widespread across the entire country. It was rather.
Right. It was the distance that the radio signal can reach.
Yeah, and even then, given that, only people that came in late into the podcast, yeah, now you can tell me, but people coming in late to the radio show would have caught it during one of the breaks in what they thought was regular programming.
Yeah. I used to live near Grover's Corners, New Jersey, and they used to celebrate that the anniversary of the show. Sometimes they had a little alien that they would parade through town.
Yeah, if you listen to the story, my hometown is mentioned. My mother's hometown is mentioned. People were listening to it throughout the broadcast area. But when you listen to it now, you're like, "Oh my God, this is ridiculous." People
was that the fact that back then? And what year was it, by the way? What year was it?
It was 1930.
Oh, it was in 30. Okay. So was that the fact there was no other sources that people could verify, where it made it more credible? Whereas today, if there were to happen today on one of the available medium, immediately people could go and double check the source. That what kind of made it credible at the time.
Yeah, well, I think sooner or later somebody realized what was going on, and they announced that it was just a story.
Yeah.
October 30th, 1938. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Halloween.
Yeah, so people had crappy modems back then.
Like I said, I'm entitled one blonde statement per episode.
Yeah.
I don't know if this counts as a conspiracy theory, but the 2 or 3 years ago, somebody came out with a photograph from the 20s and said it looks like this person is on a cell phone, and it made the rounds of the internet real quickly.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, Mysterious Universe did a story on it, and that thing crops up every few months.
Yeah, I remember that. And I also remember reading a pretty good explanation of it, but I can't remember the details.
Well, you don't find it more plausible that somebody time traveled with a cell phone, even though there's no cell phone towers back then?
That's a problem. She probably had AT&T, which sucked back then.
Yeah, wasn't that the quantum foam guy?
I didn't see a blue police box, so I really doubt it.
Yeah.
There's the Doctor Who reference for this episode.
Thank you. We're running out of time for that.
All right.
Yeah. Well, I saw something that happened. I often monitor what's going on in the paranormal community. Usually at a distance, but recently there was an event where some well-known researchers of the Roswell incident came out saying, "We've got a photograph that is a slam dunk proof of an alien body," and they these were people who had written books and were well known in the community, and they as time went on, they said, "Oh, we verified that the slide was taken in 1947, and we've had experts review the evidence, and we think we're going to come out with this, and we're going to reveal it on May 5th, 2015 in Mexico City, and our MC will be, you guessed it, Jaime Maussan, everybody's favorite hoax monger." And well, it was the UFO community itself that debunked this, and through some pretty vigorous research, they showed that this was not an alien body. This was a mummy in a museum, and they even identified which mummy it was, and found the documentation on it and everything with the Freedom of Information Act. So, that's kind of encouraging to me that you didn't need organized skepticism to step in and quash this thing. It was done by the UFO people themselves. And
some communities will police themselves, but it's not something you can count on for scientific rigor.
No, well, this was a really, really poorly done hoax. So it didn't take a ton of rigor to what it is that there's this body that looks like it could easily be a human body or a mummified human body, but it also the skull shape is a little odd, and you can sort of convince yourself it looks like the gray aliens from the UFO mythos, but there was a sign. A placard right next to it that was blurred. Nobody could read it because it was blurred in the photograph. Well, turns out there's plugins you can get for Photoshop that can de-blur. And in a few days, these guys got to where they could read most of the words on the placard. And it said it was a mummy. And it even identified the person who had provided the mummy. So, debunked. And they even went further than that and got more documentary evidence. But this was a pretty blatant and nasty little hoax that got slammed by the believer community itself. So I think that maybe there's some hope there. Maybe not. Maybe I'm.
Well, I think that's being a little over-optimistic. I wrote a blog post a couple weeks ago called "The Appeal to Embargoed Evidence," because one of the things I see constantly in the conspiracy theory community is a promise of evidence. People always saying, well, it's out there, but we can't see it because it's kept secret, or we can't show it to you because you don't deserve to see it yet, or there's 1,000 reasons people give to saying, oh, there's evidence out there. I mentioned a friend who went to a UFO convention, and this guy who was had claimed to have been abducted by a UFO said he had all these alien artifacts in his house and anybody could come see them all the time. But, nobody ever does see them and no scientist ever has access to them. So I call this the appeal to embargoed evidence, and it's pervasive with the community.
It's the God works in mysterious ways thing.
Yeah, it does.
I hear all the time, every year, the economic collapse. Like 2000, 2001, the 2002, the 2003.
Buy gold.
Yeah, buy gold. Yeah.
Gold, and then the gold standard conspiracy theorists who think that it's a terrible thing that we have a fiat currency now rather than a gold standard currency. I mean, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, they all salute the same flag.
Yeah. But let's not even start talking about the doomsday scenario now, because you know that every year somebody's going to say that, this is the year. This is really the year now, right?
This is really the year. And those predictions get falsified routinely, and nobody takes it seriously. I mean, because these people still have followers who give them money and sell their houses.
Exactly. Well, a lot of that's
miscalculated. Miscalculated. It's really next year.
A lot of that's linked in with the very pervasive belief in the United States that the second coming of Christ is imminent. I would bet you 20% of the population believes that, if not more.
If not more, yeah. That's.
I would say it's probably higher than that, especially. I mean, honestly, Christianity, when it comes down to it, is an end-of-days religion. It's all based on the world ending.
Well, now my grandfather, who was a Methodist pastor, did not believe that. He felt very strongly that was all metaphorical. But that was for a long time the mainstream belief. But it seems like sometime in the 70s or 80s, it really started getting momentum, and people really started reading the book of Revelation. Yeah. And
that's completely absent in Europe.
Right.
Well, admittedly, the Methodists are kind of a unique offshoot on Christianity. My wife went to a Methodist college, and she's a biochemical researcher. Mm. So Methodists are a little bit different than, Baptists and Episcopalians and a lot of the other Christian sects.
There's a lot of different Christian religions that there's several of them that are not end of days though.
Yeah.
They have certain beliefs, but they don't believe that the end of the world is upcoming. Some of them.
But there is a bunch that are trying to get. Apparently, they want to rebuild the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem, and these are Americans going over there, and that's supposed to usher in the end of days. And it's like they want to bring it on. They're not just trying to predict it. It's like, let's build the temple so at the end time, so Jesus can come and do whatever he want. Jesus is supposed to do to us.
Right. But they have to tear down the Dome of the Rock to do that, and that would be really unpopular.
Yeah, I think that's why so many of them are pushing the politicians, to support. Pushing them for support over in that part of the world is so they can help bring around. They're almost like a Bond villain.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to wrap up pretty soon here, but we'll go around the table. Now, this is the largest panel we've had yet with 6 people, but that's all right. We'll sort of go around the table and let everybody sort of have a last word. And we'll end with TJ, who's our only new guy. So let's start. I'm looking at my screen, and on the left I see Ciro, so let's start with Ciro.
Yes, thank you, Paul. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel again tonight. Hopefully we can do it again another time. And what can I say? Concluding words is that the field of conspiracy theories is so vast that we can probably have a lot of different shows about it on some of the subjects. So that's about it. Thank you so much.
That's kind of what Mike does on his podcast, right? Yeah. So we're just kind of stealing his thunder for one day here.
No problem.
Okay. James, how about you?
This has been a lot of fun. I'm still looking forward to when you were talking about Mike and I doing a cryptid episode. So I'm really looking forward to that one still. This has been a lot of fun. Not really anything straightforward, but I think there was a lot of good discussion on it tonight. And I would like to apologize for the noise in the background that my son was making.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I can't forgive you with that. Okay. Mike Bohler.
Well, again, thank you. This is my number 3 show, I think. I think this is my number 3, yes. So
2 or 3, yeah.
Yeah. So it's been great, and then I don't know what else to say. It's just I mean, definitely. Please, if you're listening to this and you believe in a conspiracy, just do what I do. When I look at a conspiracy, I step back and I say, okay. And I do this periodically, even over and over again. I'll step back and says, okay, has anything changed? I'm not afraid to admit to being wrong on anything. So don't be afraid to be wrong. And, it's like, if the evidence isn't supported, go with the evidence. And that's really my advice to any conspiracy type out there. Just don't blindly follow these guys. These guys don't have your interest in mind. They want to take your money, sell you the colloidal silvers and the gold and all the crap that because all they do is make money, and giving them their money, keep it in your pocket, So.
Okay, Nick Nielsen.
Thanks for having me on again, and I'd like to, as my final statement, say that I've learned that in the conspiracy community, calling somebody a skeptic is about the most horrible argument or insult that you can level at someone. So when I have someone from that background call me a skeptic and scold me for it, and they inevitably say to me, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, I immediately try to flip the script on them by saying, why are we not talking about tooth fairies? And then I go on to insist on them that I believe in the tooth fairy and I have evidence for it. And I had coins under my pillow after I left my teeth there when I was a child, and I have every reason to believe in the tooth fairy.
Coincidence? So, I think not.
No, absolutely not. So just to always remember, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and we can argue for garden gnomes and trolls and tooth fairies and anything else we like on that basis. Thank you very much again.
Okay. Patrick, Festa.
Yeah, I just want to say again, thank you. This is like, I think, my second time I was on a panelist. But don't listen to Mike. Send me your money, and I'll tell you the real reason for the hexagonal shape on Saturn.
Okay. Email me that snail mail address, man.
I'll take a cut. I'll take a cut of that.
Just put your bank account on the website.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. TJ Mulich.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I don't know if I was able to contribute much. One thing I want to add, I think a lot of times these conspiracies, a magnet is when they draw a little bit, or they sprinkle in a little bit of truth involved. George Norrie on Coast to Coast seems to have that ability. He'll have a valid, real scientist on the show, and then the next half hour he's got some nut job. Remember that George Costanza of Seinfeld fame says it's not a lie unless you believe it.
Okay, thanks, TJ. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for this episode 11. It is the 19th of June 2015, although for some of our listeners it's already the 20th. I would like to thank our panel: Ciro Villa, James Garrison, Mike Bohler, Nick Nielsen, Patrick Festa, and the new guy, TJ Mulich, on the road somewhere in flyover country. Or I guess it's drive over country for him. And it's been a great fun. This is the largest panel we've ever had. And next week we'll be back. And guess what? I will not be hosting next week. James Garrison will be hosting. So if you are interested in that show, get on the topics, the topics thread, and talk to James about what we should be talking about. I think there's already a fair bit of activity there. And this is going to be fun. And also later in July, and we'll have the announcement soon, Dr. Brian Koberlein will be joining us on one of our shows. Brian is an astrophysicist and an emerging science communicator. He has a podcast called One Universe at a Time. He also posts a lot of blog posts on Google Plus and elsewhere. Not always on astrophysics topics, but that's usually where the territories he covers. Lots of good stuff from Brian. And if you have questions for Brian, you can email them to me at unseenpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can go onto our subreddit, the Unseen Listeners subreddit, and ask your question there. And we'll get your questions to Brian, and he'll answer them on the air. There's been a ton of interesting astrophysics developments lately, and many of them quite strange and weird. And it would be fun to hear Brian sort of set us straight on some of those. So I hope you all join us for that. So this has been the Unseen Podcast, episode 11. See you next week.